So today is Saturday, February 5th, and this morning in Teisho, we'll return to commenting on Yamada Mumon Roshi's lectures on the 10 ox-herding pictures, which, if you remember, were talks that he gave to very new monks about 1954 in their period of extended initial training, and they just received ordination as monks, and they were in Sesshin. So the atmosphere is quite monastic to this, and in comments, I'll try and reorganize this, repoint it towards our ongoing lay practice, which has different parameters. However, before we begin, just a reminder about teisho. In teisho, we're not listening to a lecture. We're practicing as teisho, with teisho. So we continue with our practice. If it's a breath practice, pay attention to your breath. Counting, of course, would be put aside, and you just, let's say, allow the words of the teisho in, like the breeze in the trees, like the sound of cars passing in the street. You don't mull over them, because if you start mulling over the words of a teisho as if you're listening to a lecture, pretty soon, in fact, almost immediately, the teisho was moved on and you're left thinking. That wouldn't be the point. So the attitude in teisho is to sit as if you alone were the only one present, and the teisho is directed directly to you. And so you practice with teisho. If you're working on a koan, you continue working on the koan. The teisho is the context of your practice. If you find it too complex to attend to the koan and to the words of the teisho, then allow the teisho to take precedence. And you can breathe with the teisho and allow the words to move right through. Again, like any sound, like the breeze in the trees. It's there and then it's gone. We allow the teisho to work on us. We become the teisho, in essence. But we practice with the teisho. So today we've reached the 5th ox-herding picture out of the 10. So we're halfway there. And we're looking at taming the ox at last. The preface poem goes like this. Once one little thought arises, another follows. Adhere to awakening, and all becomes truth. Reside in ignorance, and all is unreal. This happens not because of the world, but only because of your mind. Keep a firm grip on that rope and do not waver. Remember, you're herding an ox, and now you've gotten hold of the ox and you've got the rope around his muzzle or through the nose ring. It's quite a feat. First, you had to find tracks and traces. Then you had to catch a glimpse of the ox. Then you had to catch hold of the ox. And now, at last, you're taming this ox. The ox, of course, is a metaphor for our own nature, which has never been lost in reality, is always right here in reality, but we just don't see it. So we search and search. We see tracks and traces through reading, through our own life experiences every now and then. Then we catch a glimpse, the self-centeredness that we're so habituated to falls away. The world steps in, the 10,000 things step in, are us for a second. We've caught a glimpse, then it's gone again. The ox has rushed off, gone back to its old haunts. Now we're taking hold of this ox and we're going to tame it. So once one little thought arises, another follows. And isn't that the case? Everything has its own propulsive energy, doesn't it? Every thought arises. Where does it arise from? Where do thoughts come from? Where do you see a thought from? Where do you think the thought from? It's weird if your head is cut open, so you have surgery on your head, or a Viking takes an axe to your head, they never find a single thought. What dimension are we in? In the realm of thought, in the realm of image. This is very strange, being a human being, isn't it? Having a mind. Where is that mind? Again, if your head is operated on, they never find something called a mind. They find a brain. But no memories, no thoughts, no aspirations, no wishes, no dreams. Where is all that? How strange it is, and we take it so for granted. One thought arises, and it propels the next, like a ripple. How do we step out of this without suppressing thought? You don't want to suppress thought. It's part of our creativity. You don't want to get rid of thought, but how do you not be trapped and bound and limited? Become something internal, separated from everything and everyone else. That's our human predicament. One thought arises and another follows. Adhere to awakening and all becomes truth. Roshi Kapleau used to say, the right person makes the wrong teaching right, and the wrong person, someone without any understanding, let's say, makes a right teaching wrong. There you have it in a nutshell. Adhere to awakening, and all becomes truth. The stupidest song, popular song, can open up tremendous depths if you're in the right awareness. And the most profound piece of writing, if you have no insight whatsoever, will fall on deaf ears. Adhere to awakening and all becomes truth. The garbage on the street, the pebbles, the dog shit, the clouds, everything speaks truth. If your eyes are open, if your ears are open. But reside in ignorance and all is unreal. You can stand before the most fantastic painting of Rembrandt's and see nothing. If you're all caught up in yourself, the bills I haven't paid and all of it, you won't even see the painting. You won't see the sunrise or the sunset. You won't see the smile on your friend's face. It's all lost to you. It all becomes untrue. There it is. This happens not because of the world, but only because of your mind. Keep a firm grip on that rope. Do not waver. What is that rope? Move. 1, 2. Just this breath. Just who's hearing? That rope. That rope. All our problems as human beings arise not because we have a mind, but because we don't know how to use our own minds. We have to learn. That's the difficulty of being a human being. We have to learn how to use our own mind. We need culture. We need teachings. Human beings have developed to provide teachings, but our culture makes it harder. It's so fortunate to find a path of teaching that helps us learn to use our own minds. That's what it comes down to. So the verse, not for a moment put down whip or rein, lest the ox wander back to dust and desire. Pull again and again till it's tame and gentle, or of itself it will follow without bridle or chain. So that's the first verse for this. Right. Not for a moment put down whip or rein, but let's be careful. Whip doesn't mean you're beating yourself. You're not beating the ox. It simply means keep at it. Steady on. Right now, you've dropped it. Pick it up again. What is moo? Who's hearing? Who sees color with the eyes? Who hears sounds right now with the ears? Who thinks thoughts? Allow these questions. Or why was I born? Why must I die? These are fundamental questions of being human, which if we sit, even just sit quietly, experiencing breath, eventually, our deepest questions as human beings will arise as our minds start to settle. They're always there. Don't put down the whip or rein, lest the ox wander back to dust and desire. What is the dust and desire the ox keeps running back to? Well, it all comes down to, I want this, I want that, I like this, I like that, I don't like that. And here we are, back again. You can't get rid of right and wrong. That would be a big mistake. But how do we not get trapped by all our thoughts? I is the center of it. I want this. I want that. But you can't suppress the self. You can't get rid of the self. What is the self becomes the question. What is this self that wants these things, that lusts after things? Our culture does a very good job of insisting that we should want things. What has that done to us? What has it done to the earth? How do we live in harmony with all beings? That's the nature of Sangha. I vow to live in harmony with all sentient beings. When we take the three refuges, I take refuge in Buddha. I take refuge in Dharma. I take refuge in Sangha. This is to live in harmony with all beings. How do we do it if we're filled with thoughts of me, myself, and I, and what I want? We make it so hard for ourselves. How do we release that? How do we live with the sun, moon, stars, with other living beings, with this very earth, with these forests and mountains and rivers, and not cut ourselves off from it and turn it into a mess? Our world is in such a mess because we human beings simply aren't mature enough to know how to use our own minds. We can do something about it. That's the whole point of practice. It's not to make us Zen Buddhists, for lack of a better word. It's to help us become grown-up human beings. That's the whole point of the Buddhist teaching. Pull again and again on that chain, that nose rope. Keep pulling it back. What is Mu? 1, 2. Who's hearing? And it becomes in time, the ox becomes tame and gentle and of itself will follow without bridle or chain. In fact, after a while, you won't even be able to drive the ox away. It's just there. It's always there. You're beginning to tame the ox. It becomes gentle and present. An ox is a hardworking animal. Wild at first, it will pull stumps and plow fields and do all kinds of good things, give children rides on its back. Once it's tamed, that's our own mind. How unruly it is, like a wild ox. How strong it is, like a wild ox. And yet, when tamed, how gentle, how helpful, how selfless, working for the benefit of the community, pulling up stumps, plowing the fields. Now the waka, the conclusion of the poems of the opening for this 5th picture. Days pass, even the wild ox comes to hand and becomes a shadow to my body. How gratifying. All we can say then is indeed, indeed. How gratifying, how fulfilling it is to have this mind, to have these senses, to have this body transient and as impermanent as it is. How gratifying to see the sun in the morning, to see the stars at night, to hear the sound of cars going by in the street, to see the snow fall, to taste this tea. How mysterious and gratifying everything might be. So now, Yamada Mumen Roshi's lecture. teisho. Now, Yamada Muman Roshi, of course, was not Yamada Koan Roshi, who was Aiken Roshi's teacher, and also companion of Philip Kapleau Roshi. They worked, he did some of the translations for the Three Pillars of Zen. So here is Yamada Muman Roshi. Let me again show you his picture. Interesting fellow. He's a very noted contemporary teacher, and was Shogun Harada Roshi's teacher, who is a very important Japanese teacher today. So, well, now, you finally caught the ox, but this ox will not do what you want it to do. Isn't that the truth? You got hold of the ox, but it still won't do what you want it to do. Yeah, I've seen it. I know I've seen it. I've gotten hold of it, but I can't live it. That's the thing, that Zen is so interesting about. Many traditions, you might see the ox and then you'll go write a book about it. Zen kind of asks you to live it. Learn how to live it in the way you interact with the world around you, the way you treat yourself and others, to be able to really demonstrate it with your life. This is an unusual challenge and a very difficult one. It's one thing to see, whatever you want to say, insight might be. It's another thing to live it. I can see it, but I can't live it. What is that line from Dylan, Dear Landlord? Anyone can fill up their life with things they can see, but they just cannot touch. Isn't that the thing that happens? All the insights we have, we can see them, but we can't live them. That's the challenge, to live them, tame the ox. That's why you have to train it and make it your own. That's what we mean by taming the ox. This is what is otherwise called post-Satori practice. In other words, after glimpsing the ox, which might mean being passed on an initial koan, but of course, no one ever truly ever passes a koan. We work on it our whole life. We can begin work on subsequent koans. We've seen enough to begin work on subsequent koans. That doesn't mean we've had some great enlightenment. What it means is we've seen enough to begin working on subsequent koans. And hopefully over years and years of doing that ongoing koan practice, we then eventually may have an experience that's self-confirming. In other words, you don't need anyone to tell you. You've really seen it. It's really there. You're gone. The world has stepped in. But that could be far, far down the road after an initial vague, kind of timid insight. You can see, I think that's an ox. Maybe, yeah, that's an ox. And then maybe 20 years later, you can see the dung on its hooves. You can see the mucus dripping from its muzzle. You know it's an ox. That's the difference. So we're talking about, you've seen the ox, okay, well, now you can start taming it, which is what koan practice is really all about. Kensho, or awakening, is our goal, but without any follow-up, kensho amounts to nothing. It becomes like a nice memory if you don't continue practicing. Oh, once I really felt at one with the world. It was nice. It was good. It affected me deeply. But now it's a memory. To continue practicing is to begin to be able to live this truth you've seen minute by minute, breath by breath, in all the circumstances, even the challenging and painful and sad and difficult ones that seem to be obstacles in our life. Maybe they're not obstacles. Life is full of ups and downs. We can't flatten them out. How do we live right in the midst of them with the sense of how gratifying, as that verse said, how gratifying. This is a challenge for each one of us because we're all going to run into difficulties in our lives. That's how it is. So you must tame that ox which you worked so hard to catch. For us, training and practice continue right up until we die. Yeah, it's very sad. There are people who, over the how many years? We started formal practice in Rose and I started formal practice 1970. So that's like 50 years. 50 years, we've seen a lot of people come and go who had something in practice, and then they think, oh, I've had enough, I've got enough, and they walk away. And they don't continue working with taming that ox right up to the very time of their last breath. It means they miss so much of what's possible to yet realize. Aiken Roshi always used to say, not enough yet, not yet enough. In other words, the insight we may have now is minuscule compared to the insight that each one of us has the potential for. We each have the same potential as the Buddha, to fully awake, to fully access all the wisdom and virtue of the universe, really. And yet our insight into it and our ability to live from it is so minuscule compared to what our potential is. You have to keep going. And in Zen, it said you keep going for lifetimes, not just this life. And that's what the Jataka tales show in Buddhism. The Buddha kept working at it. It wasn't like bingo, he was the Buddha. It was like he worked in it as an ordinary person who simply decided he'd had enough of the crap and was going to grow up. And lifetime after lifetime, he kept working at it, taming the ox. So Christians think of their minister as a shepherd, but for us, we're not sheep who expect to be watched over by a teacher. We ourselves must each tame and train our own ox. The most important chapter of the 10 ox herding pictures is this one, Taming the Ox, where you sit down and chew the cud of Satori, fully appreciating its texture. And again, this Satori, so-called, Satori is usually reserved for a pretty deep experience. These days, most of us start with a faint kensho. It's just enough to give us a leg up, a chance to begin working on subsequent koans. And if we continue on, the initial insight is broadened and deepened by years of ongoing koan work. The preface, he goes, once one little thought arises, another follows. And now he'll comment on that. If even the slightest little thought should arise, then one after another endlessly, other thoughts arise. Think of it like ripples on a pond. You drop in a stone, that's one thought, and then boop, 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 boop. Ripples extend all the way across. That happens minute by minute in our minds. Just pay attention one day and you'll see it. How one thought leads to another thought that leads to a memory of something that happened 30 years ago, which leads to why did I do that, which leads to all kinds of ramifications. And it started with one little thought that caught your attention. And there you are. We call this, as soon as one thought fades, the next thought arises. And when that one fades, then another one follows that. We call this being lost in samsara. Samsara literally means wandering. In other words, it's the mind wandering all around. And it creates the world that we experience in samsara is the world as created by a wandering mind. What kind of world do we live in if we live from a focused mind, a concentrated mind, a fully present mind? Is it the same world? Samsara is the world as created and experienced by a wandering, an unsettled, an untamed mind. When the thought that you're hungry arises, then the next one you think about is what you want to eat. You think, what will I have to eat? How about noodles, or maybe Chinese food, or maybe a steak? And then you think, do I have enough money? If I don't have enough money, what will I do? It's all self-centered thinking, isn't it? I is at the root of it all. You can't get rid of I. How do we not get caught this way? This is the whole point of practice. Selfless doesn't mean you're not you, just means you're not lost in your own habitual trap of self-centered thinking. Yeah. All kinds of unreal ideas and notions arise. Your head is full of such unreal thoughts and ideas. So starting with the question, with the realization you're hungry, you end up worrying about money. That's how it goes. And there's our life in a nutshell, our samsaric life, the life of the wandering mind. Now, it doesn't mean these thoughts won't arise, but how do we not get caught by them? You can't suppress them. You can't stop it. We attend fully to the practice. If you attend fully to mu, or the count, one, you count on the exhale all the way out, two, then there's no room for other things to arise. The mind becomes focused and still. And then the world can enter, this tree, this breeze, this taste of tea. How is that different from myself, my real self, not my thought self? And here's the transition. The transition happens through ongoing practice, not through a thought about practice, not I should be practicing, but simply drop it and or when you do Zazen, then you realize how full of unreal thoughts the human animal is. Ordinary people are out working, so they carry on their daily lives without thinking that their own unreal thoughts are unreal. Ordinary people, remember, he's speaking to monks. He means people who aren't monks, aren't, doing it that way. But try doing a little Zazen and you'll realize how full of unreal thoughts humans are. Such unnecessary, useless thinking. Now, this doesn't mean there's anything wrong with thinking. Thought is extremely valuable when it's applied, but it's not the same as being lost in this endless storm of thoughts about me and how I'm doing. And if I want to get something to eat, we end up thinking about the mortgage or other bills that have to get paid or whatever it is. We're just one thing after another. We're lost in it. So real thinking means having a focused mind and applying thought, thinking deeply and clearly. So please, let's not think Zen is against thought by any means. No. It's about how do we free ourselves from being lost in self-centered thinking that isolates us from the world, from other people, and we're seeing the dire consequences of that played out on our planet everywhere. Self-centered thought, because human beings like us just don't know how to use our own minds. And the potential we've been gifted with the human mind and human senses and human body, we waste it and we become destructive because talents and abilities unused fester. And every human being has tremendous potential. This is the essence of the Buddha's teaching. And when it's unused, it festers. And look what we've done to the world around us, to ourselves. The point is, how do we heal? Practice is that path pointed out by the Buddha 2,500 years ago. Such unnecessary, useless thinking, such mental waste. You think things that you do not have to think. This is like letting an engine run idle or leaving the lights on. In other words, it's wasteful. If you leave the lights on when you've exited a room, you've not paid attention. You're just being wasteful. If you're running the engine of the car when you're sitting there waiting for someone for 5 minutes, you're polluting and you're being wasteful. It's thoughtless behavior. But it's really not thoughtless. It's because you're full of thought. You don't notice these littlest things that change everything by the way we act, the things we actually do. Adhere to awakening and all becomes truth. Reside in ignorance and all is unreal. It's how we use the mind is what makes it so. I think Milton in Paradise Lost said something like that, about we create our own heaven and our own hell. It all takes place in the mind. Once you cut right through unreal thinking, then that world we call awakening or enlightenment is revealed. Aiken Roshi liked the term, which was traditional in China, ancient China, intimacy. So another word for awakening or enlightenment is intimacy. Enlightenment makes it seem like it's something you can get. You can't get it any more than you can enter a room you never left. But you can become intimate with this speck of dust. You can become intimate with the sound of the rain. You can become intimate with the light streaming from the lamp. Intimacy is, I think, a very valuable way of thinking about realization. In fact, the most intimate moments are when you're not there at all. When the dog steps in, when the child steps in, when the sunrise steps in, when a friend's talk fills you completely. You don't get enlightenment. You disappear into everything. In fact, everything disappears into you is more accurate. Intimacy. Seen from the world of awakening, you can grasp the true nature of things. People in the world at large think, or the actual nature of things. True nature seems to imply there's an unreal nature, and in a way that's true, but if you just think the actual nature of things, it's just what is. It's what really is when you take away the blinders. People in the world at large think they are seeing things truly, but really they see just the shadow of things. What is that line from the Bible? Something about, here we see through a glass darkly. There we shall see face to face. They look at things through their many wants and desires, through that self-interest that says, me. Going through life only looking at things through their own personal experience, they've lost their grip on what is true and real. Since their hearts and minds are full of unreal thoughts, the world that they see is, of course, unreal. This is the world of samsara, the world created and experienced by our own wandering minds. When you think of our politics globally these days, when you think of our environmental destruction, how can you have any argument with what Yamada Mumen Roshi is saying? Going through life only looking at things through their own personal experience, they've lost their grip on what is true and real. And we will chop down a forest that gives us oxygen and all kinds of medicines in order to make more money, often done by people who have enough money to start with. And then abuse the indigenous peoples of the area, turn them into woodcutters, destroying their own homes. We've lost our grip on what's real. And this is not philosophy. I mean, this is what our world is showing. And this is what Zen and the Buddhist teachings have been speaking to for the last 2,500 years. It seems to me it's come to a head at this point. We have to do something. And one of those things we can do is practice. It doesn't mean you stop activating for change, but you can come forward from a foundation of practice into it. Change yourself. It doesn't mean give up on changing things that need changing. But change the attention we pay to old habits that we've outgrown, need to let go of. Yeah. Moby Dick, one of my favorite books from about 6th grade on, first few chapters talk about Narcissus, who looked into the pool and saw only himself. The ungraspable phantom of life, Melville says. This is the key to it all. When we look at the world and see ourselves in the sense of me, myself, and I, and what I want and what I want to do, and we're lost like Narcissus, seeing only our own reflection. We've lost our grip on what is real. and our world shows it. Human beings, we ourselves have done this. How do we undo it? This happens not because of the world, but only because of your mind. True and false do not exist in the world out there, depending on whether the mind that looks out on the world is awakened or deluded. The things of the world are true or false. The moon neither weeps nor smiles. He's speaking about poetic metaphors. The moon weeps or the moon smiles. It doesn't. Here's a poem. I gaze at the moon, sad for the thousand things, though it's not my autumn moon alone. Interesting little poem. I gaze at the moon, sad for the thousand things, though it's not my autumn moon alone. I think there's an interesting insight there. When you're lonely in heart and cry from sadness, then too the moon cries. And when you're laughing inside, the moon too laughs. Thinking all this is my world, I gaze at the moon, thinking nothing is amiss. Thinking all this is my world, I gaze at the moon, thinking nothing is amiss. Yamada Roshi used to say, when I'm sad, the whole universe is sad. When I'm happy, the whole universe is happy. We are intimately what was Thich Nhat Hanh's felicitous phrase, interbeing. We are a unified interbeing with all things. It goes both ways. When I'm happy, everything is happy. When the Buddha is enlightened, everyone is enlightened. When anyone realizes their own nature, everyone has a touch of it. And when the world is sad and struggling, we all are sad and struggling. When you're full of spirit, then the moon too will appear full of spirit. Things in themselves are neither true nor false. They're neither sad nor happy. Western literature touches on this again and again. What I do with the mind creates a heaven or hell. You can find that all the way back in Western literature, English literature, which I used to know something about, but I've forgotten a great deal. There's nothing so important as water, that even though you cannot live for one day without water, if you get swept away in a flood, you will feel there's nothing so terrible as water. Water itself is neither good nor bad, but people see it as good or bad depending on their particular situation at the time. You may search the world looking for truth, but there is no truth in the world. It arises only from the heart-mind, which is the ox. When the heart-mind that is looking is true, then the world also is true. When the heart-mind that is looking is false, then the world being looked at also becomes false. There's that thing that, again, Roshi Kapleau used to say, the right person makes the wrong teaching true. The wrong person makes the right teaching wrong or false. What is it for you to always be true? It is a matter of ridding yourself of thoughts, that is, of self-centered thoughts. The ideal is not just getting rid of thoughts. It's seeing through our habitual use of the mind to generate self-centeredness. The true state of being of the human person is no idea, no thought consciousness. It is no mind consciousness. That's true. It's just this. Nothing's hidden. When the self-centered mind falls away, everything steps in, true and clear. Nothing's hidden. Nothing's been hidden from the beginning. There is no glass darkly in reality. That's something we've created. The true nature of our heart-mind is a mirror, like spotless condition, unmarred by even a single thought. That's true. That's true. It doesn't mean blankness, though. It's not a matter of blankness. It's much more wonderful than being consumed by thought. Everything is present, everything is real. Everything is like a treasure house, ready to be opened from the smallest leaf to the tallest mountain. And this is our own nature. To come in touch with it, even once in life, changes us for the better. The many unreal thoughts and ideas we have are images cast upon this mirror. No matter how much you search there for truth, there is no truth there. Our original nature is that condition, like a spotless mirror, where fundamentally there is not one thing. In other words, there's no thingness there. Things require separation. They require someone separate from them to make this into a thing. I don't know what it is. Look at this beautiful bronze color, I guess you'd call it bronze. And what is this? I don't know. I mean, if you look at it completely innocently, like a child, it's kind of fascinating. It's a light pole. You can buy it for 50 cents at the 5 and dime store, if there's still 5 and dime stores around. Go to the hardware store, it might cost you $1. What's the big deal? And yet, if you really look at it, it's pretty astonishing. What is it? Those who come into contact with a person of such consciousness are all themselves helped. If you yourself are no mind, then without you saying or doing anything, people who come into contact with you too will take away some of that no mind. This is how Zen helps people. When a single beautiful flower blossoms, those who look upon it become gentle and calm in feeling. When a single individual attains awakening, those who come into contact with that person also awaken to one degree or another. They too are saved. This is what is meant by saving sentient beings. In other words, when we come in touch with someone who is actually living realization, we sense our own realization. And that's what it draws us to that person. It's our own nature. Keep a firm grip. Keep a firm grip on that rope and do not waver. Catch the ox's nose line and keep a firm grip on it so that you never waver from mindfulness, or we might say in Zen, mindfulness has become such a catchword these days. What Zen offers is mindlessness. They're two sides of the same coin, but one of the problems with mindfulness is I'm being mindful. Zen pulls that rug out from under us, is my sense. I can't speak, I've never really trained in mindfulness, but anyway, do this and there'll be no faltering. To waver is to falter, to hesitate. Right from the start, leave no room to insert any doubt or discrimination, moment to moment, no mind. Just advance straight down this path and you'll be all right. To maintain this consciousness, to proceed in moment to moment mindfulness is what is meant by taming the ox. And in Sesshin, which is, again, he's speaking to monks in Sesshin, this is every minute, moo. Moo. With each breath, Aiken Roshi used to say, sink into moo, let everything else go. Or it's the count. Putting all our attention there, not getting caught up in the thoughts that come and go like clouds across the sky. Instead of getting fixated on the clouds, we start paying attention to the sky in which they come and go. In ancient times, there was a famous priest in China called Ransan who had withdrawn to a rock cave on Mount Kozan to do post-Satori training, which in Zen is called the long nurturing of the sacred embryo. When we gave teisho on Tore Enji's major work, I forgot the name of it. He was a student, main disciple of Hakuin Zenji. He spoke about nurturing of the sacred embryo. It's almost an alchemical term. It really means nurturing this deeper awareness that's potential to each human being so that it can really mature and truly get born and function in the world. Once it's first born, of course, it can't speak, it can't move, it can't crawl. And eventually, through training, the embryo becomes a human being. It can walk, it can dance, it can sing, it can live, it can vote, it can do things. But it starts as an embryo that has to be protected and nurtured. Emperor Topsu of the Tang dynasty heard of this person of great virtue and sent out a summons requesting him to come to the capital and give talks on the Buddha Dharma. When the imperial messenger reached Mount Kozan, he found Ransan cooking some yams over a fire made from cow dung. There was also, it said, and I think he gets into this next paragraph, said to be like his nose was dripping. It was a cold day. He was sitting by a dung fire, roasting yams. He didn't even look up to greet the messenger, the imperial messenger, when he arrived. He just kept turning his yams. The messenger said, "Virtuous priest, this is a gracious invitation from his imperial majesty. You should not remain squatting there baking those roots. Normally one stands up and makes a polite reply." But even at these words, Ransan ignored him. He continued baking his yams, letting a long drop of mucus hang off the end of his nose. The drip at the end of his nose was so long it looked like it would reach his chest. At this sight, the messenger continued, "You can at least wipe your nose, can't you?" Ransan replied, "Here I am completely absorbed in what I'm doing. Just because someone like you from the outside world shows up, you think I have time to wipe my nose?" Everything had fallen away for Ransan. It was just this, just these flames, just this drip of mucus, just the cold air on his skin and the heat from the fire and the smell of the yams baking on a fuel of cow dung. What did he need the emperor for? What did he need an imperial summons for? What could it add to him? What would it take away? I don't have time to wipe my nose. This is post-Satori training. Only a person who has trained and attained Satori does this kind of post-Satori training. Those who have not seen their own nature, who have not attained Satori or awakening, can do nothing but stir up more unreal thoughts. Verse, "Not for a moment put down whip or rein, lest the ox wander back to dust and desire." This says, keep a firm hold on the nose line with one hand, hold the whip tightly in the other hand, and do not for a moment let go of the ox. If you are careless, the ox will go and hide itself in dust and refuse. And we get caught up in all our old stuff again, and it's gone, this insight that we had. Keep hold of it. In Zen, it said, pride comes before a fall. Oh, I've got it. I've got it. Here we are, back in the same dust and refuse that we so proudly thought we'd left behind. If you let one thought through, then that one thought will cause another to occur. If you let your attention waver, this ox will run off somewhere. Do not let down your guard, allow no openings, keep a tight grip on that whip and line. But again, it's not just about having no thoughts. That's a very monastic attitude. We're lay people. We live in the world. We're going to have thoughts all the time. We do our best when we're sitting to release that. But the important thing is to attend to the practice and let the mind do whatever it's going to do. And when there's a time to think, then think, please. Use thought. But remember, this is advice for very young monks in Sesshin. As lay people, we have minutes in the day where we can really attend to just this move, just this count. Maybe the phone rings and goes ring, ring, and you, hello, and you come forward from that. But it's not like getting rid of anything. It's seeing through the places we're typically, habitually isolating ourselves and separating ourselves. As you train the ox, pulling with the rope and beating with the whip, well, look, beating is kind of this very loaded term. Gradually becomes tame. It's just moo, just who, just this count one. There's no beating. It's pushing the metaphor into something too literal, and it can create a great deal of confusion. You don't beat up the self. Be aware, understand it, see what's really going on. This is what practice opens. Gradually it becomes tame. That is, train the ox by pulling with the rope, called the koans, and by beating with the whip called the old cases. In other words, koans again. To take on the challenge of such practice is faith in action. We have faith that there is something more, that there is an ox to tame, that the Buddha wasn't a fool or liar when 2,500 years ago he said, wonder of wonders. And this wasn't because of philosophy, it was out of his own experience. He spontaneously, it overwhelmed him. He exclaimed, wonder of wonders. Wonder of wonders. All beings are Buddha. All beings are Buddhas, fully endowed with all the wisdom, all the compassion, all the virtue of the universe. It's just that because of self-centered habitual thinking, they don't see it. Koan practice, Zen practice, any form of spiritual practice begins with some faith that there is something more than just the intellect or just the senses, and that we can realize it or awake to it. That's the essence of it. Doing practice is faith in action. And in Zen, faith grows by experience. All of us have experienced something that suggests to us there is more. Whether you're practicing or not, everyone at some point in their life has some experience like that, or some memory of it from childhood. And then there comes a point where we have to choose, are we going to act on this or not? Are we going to let it stay a memory that haunts us, or are we going to do something about it? Are we going to act on it? Taking up formal practice is acting on it, doing something about it. Eventually, the ox will become gentle and docile and will do your bidding. It becomes well-behaved and will not run away. Sitting, standing, clearly the ox, Buddha nature, is there, self-aware. We've got one more page, so let's see if we can do it. It may take us about 2 or 3 minutes extra. Of itself, it will follow without bridle or chain. When the ox has been tamed, though you do not use the whip or the line, it will always follow you like a well-trained dog. Though you forget all about koans, you will always be in no mind. You get so that you always just be there thinking of nothing. Well, that's not exactly true. That's, again, a very separated, very monastic perspective. It's just that everything will always have the opportunity to step in and replace the self. This is Dogen's view. To move the self forward to become one with the 10,000 things is called delusion. For the 10,000 things to step in and realize themselves through the self, this is intimacy or realization. So it's not about becoming blank. And he uses that word, and I think it's quite inaccurate. It may be the translation in Japanese. I don't know exactly what he said. You must take the training of the ox to this point. You must train the ox so that you will not lose kensho, so that you will not lose Buddha nature. But of course, you can't lose Buddha nature. So again, this is very dualistic language, and I would question if that's what he actually said. We can always become more intimate with our own nature and with the world. It's endless degrees of refinement. So you must, somewhere in the record of Rinzai, Linji in Chinese, says, don't continue on with thoughts that have already arisen, and don't arouse any that have not yet been aroused. Just this will be worth far more to you than 10 years of pilgrimage. Yeah, I think that's true. Just pay attention to this breath, to this count. Whatever's happened in the past, don't cling to it in your head. Whatever is going to happen, don't cling to it in your head. Just move. Just who is hearing right now these words? Who is seeing colors with the eyes? Who's experiencing this body? Just this one, just this two on the exhale, all the way out. 1, 2. Just move. Just who. Let everything else go. This will be worth more than 10 years of pilgrimage to continue this practice. To wake up right where we are. It doesn't require any esoteric foundations. We don't need to go anywhere, really. What's the old saying? Something about a 10 square foot room. The whole world steps in if we're really present. Don't let thoughts that have already risen lead you off. Let them pass away untouched, just as they've arisen. And about those thoughts which not yet arisen, it's unnecessary to think, I must not cause them to arise. That's true. Why think that? That's just one more thought. Just go back to paying attention to the practice. If you concentrate on letting go of all thoughts which may rise without grasping to them, this will be more useful than 10 years of half-hearted monastery training. And Yamada Mumon, I think, makes a great point there with that. Just to practice wherever you are in your life, in your house, in your work, walking down the street, that's more valuable than 10 years of half-hearted monastery training. The issue about half-hearted monastery training goes to the point that many young monks in Japan became monks or priests as a job. They were going to take over their father's temple. So their training is kind of half-hearted. It's not that they have a deep aspiration to know themselves, to really bring greater wisdom and compassion into the world. It's simply, it goes with the job, and it's a credential they have to have, like a driver's license, in order to take over their father's temple. And that was happening and still is in Japan, which is why lay practice has become such an important thing in the West, because lay people, there's no reason to do this except your own aspiration. You know you're not at peace. You know the world is in a desperate condition. You know your family, your friends, everybody needs something more. What can you do about it? Lay people, Yasutani Roshi eventually didn't work with monastics at all. He was Philip Kapleau, Roshi's teacher. He only worked with lay people because lay people get the need to really wake up, to mature as human beings. So Yamada Mumen Roshi is making the same point here. Days pass, even the wild ox comes to hand and becomes a shadow to my body. How gratifying. In other words, we don't have to chase after it. Eiken Roshi said, sink into Mu. He didn't say grab onto Mu and hold it tight and don't let go. He said sink into Mu. You can let go and fall into Mu. The wild ox comes to hand and becomes a shadow to my body. How gratifying. With day after day devoted to training and practice, the ox, the heart mind that always wants to get lost, even this ox will come to follow you around like your own shadow. It is truly a great pleasure when you know that you can always savor the world of no mind in this way, in every activity. It's like the salt in salt water, like the paint, the binder in paint is the first one of the first verses of the first Looking for the Ox painting of the ox herding pictures. You can sink into it right now and savor no mind. Allow what's right before you to step right into you. You can savor this drinking a cup of tea. You can savor this bicycling down the street. You can savor this talking on the phone to a friend. This is how our life is transformed. It is truly a great pleasure when you know you can always savor the world of no mind in this way. There is no pleasure as great as this, but remember, it is days past. It is not a matter of just 1 or 2 days spent trying to tame the ox. It is not a matter of a mere 5-day or 7-day session. You must live in continuous concentration. Focus on this moment. Be present to move, to one, to what is this? Never letting up. How could you let up? It's your life. Gasan Osho has a verse. Half awakened by the night watch drum, tomorrow, what throw will I use? He's talking about a sumo wrestler. Even while sleeping, he's thinking, tomorrow's bout I meet so-and-so. What throw will I use on him? Sleeping or waking, he is always focused on the bout. Sumo does not take place just inside the ring, outside even when sleeping. The sumo wrestler is thinking, tomorrow, what throw should I use? So I put this one request to you. Get into koan samadhi or practice samadhi or the count samadhi or the breath samadhi. Samadhi simply means letting the self go and allowing everything to be present to you. Keep a firm grip on this line and concentrate, concentrate, concentrate. Keep going, keep going. Keep going. Turn the mind always towards it. It's just like when doing a piece of writing or a painting. You always have the mind on it, even when you're not doing it. I remember when I was doing a lot of storytelling, I would turn my mind on the story, even when I wasn't performing. I was thinking about it, how to get it to work. It becomes a kind of natural part of the way you use your mind. Now it's who's hearing. Now it's what is mu. Now it's one. What is my own nature? Where is this damn ox? How do I ride it home? How do I become useful to this world? We'll stop here and recite our great vows for all.